Okay, we're ready to start. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Wendy Galernter. I'm going to be your host today. And I think before we get started, I'll give you the agenda in a minute. But I wanted to say that you all know there were, I think, about 6 million people who volunteered in this last election to elect candidates up and down the ballot. And those 6 million people are all still out there. They're all doing exactly what we're doing today, which is getting together to try to answer some questions, uh, to feel a little bit of solidarity, and to figure out how we're going to move forward from here. So thank you for being here, and thank you for taking that first step against, I think, the confusion and the disorientation and the sadness that we've all been feeling. Those feelings we all felt when we woke up on November 6th and we wondered what in the world happened, what happened to that joyful and hopeful Harrison Waltz campaign, what happened to all the voters that we thought were going to show up and save the day. And what happened to our fellow Americans? Did they all lose their minds or what? Uh, so today, what we're going to try to do is start answering some of those questions. Of course, there's going to be a lot more questions than answers that we still have by the end. But hopefully, we can begin the process of getting some perspective and some solidarity that'll give us a basis for going forward into the future. So let's move on with the meeting. And our agenda is going to be pretty simple today. Going to go over a few goals. Actually, no, I deleted that slide. Never mind. We're going to just launch right into what happened, and then talk about what actions and what things we can do in our own lives to move forward. There will be some time for questions and answers, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And this is being recorded, so we will put this recording online, and we will send you all a follow-up email that has all the links and the information that we talk about in this talk. So you don't have to take notes necessarily if you don't want to. You don't have to copy down links. You will all get an email by Monday with all of that information. And if you haven't done it already, again, please use the chat to say hi and tell us where you are joining in from. And yes, as I just mentioned, there will be some time for questions and answers. The best way to do this, or actually the only way, is to use this Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll try to answer as many as possible. We won't get to all of them, but we can put some of them on the table for next time. We're not going to deal with raised hands just because it's a little too hard for me to track, but Q&A should work well. And just a little bit about our group before we get started. So we're a chapter of a national organization called Swing Left. It's an electoral group that supports candidates frequently in swing districts. And the mission of our local San Diego group has been to drive positive change, progressive change, by supporting progressive candidates and policies, by targeting key electoral opportunities, and then by providing you all with whatever tools you need to stay engaged and informed and effective at the national, state, and local levels. And we do that a few ways. We keep people informed with a website we have, and also with an email newsletter that goes out about once every 2 weeks. We keep people informed of joint actions that we can take together, whether it's canvassing or listening to informational speakers or fundraising or whatever. And we provide our members with the training that they need, again, to be effective in reaching all these goals. And I thought, in addition to telling you about the group, which has been around since 2020, by the way, I would tell you, since you're going to be listening to me talk for about the next 30 minutes or so, I would tell you just a little bit about myself. And that is that I live in San Diego. I have lived here for the last 40 years. I'm originally from New York. Uh, I am not a political scientist. I'm not a veteran campaign manager. My professional background is actually as a scientist. I was did research on biological control of insects. So it seems pretty far away from politics. But since I have retired, I have been extremely fortunate to be able to blend my scientific background and the kind of the analysis and the attempt for non-bias, to be non-biased, and to wed that with what's been a lifelong, um, I guess, staple of my life, which is being a progressive activist. And when I was much, much younger, I was an organizer for the United Farm Workers Union. I've been involved in the anti-nuclear power movement. And then, of course, since, like a lot of you, since Trump was elected in 2016, I became kind of an electoral, um, an electoral activist, I guess we can say. Um, Getting back to our group, I just wanted to give you an idea in the last year of some of the candidates and policies that we've supported. We have supported candidates from very local, like some local judges, city attorney, mayoral candidates, all the way up to what I'll show you in the next slide, which are, the very national races. We also support various policies around homelessness, criminal justice reform. Most recently, we got involved with with lowrider community and got a ban on lowriders lifted here in San Diego and actually in California. And these check marks next to each of the candidates we supported are those who won their elections. And I did that just to show you we don't always support the candidates that we know for sure are going to win. We support the ones that we think have a chance and that represent our values. And sometimes they win and sometimes they lose, but we keep on going. And we work on a year-round basis, not just around election times. Our targets for out of state this past year, Tom Suozzi, who took George Santos's place in Congress in New York, a new state Supreme Court Justice in Wisconsin, Janet Protasiewicz, Ruben Gallego, who I know many people who were here canvassed for him in Yuma with us this year, and he won over horrible MAGA Kari Lake. And we did a big focus, letter writing, phone calling, fundraising, canvassing, to target infrequent voters from some of the big swing states, including Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. And at the top of the ticket, we were not successful in that win. And that's what we're all here to talk about, is kind of why and how did that all happen. Just one more slide about us. We do fundraising. This year, we raised $9,500 through our partners in Swing Left, who helped us target candidates all around the country who were in those very, very tight races. And as it turned out, about half the candidates the money went to won their elections. The other half didn't, which shows that it was a pretty good list of very tight, difficult to win races where every dollar that people gave, and I know a lot of you out there gave money, every dollar you gave helped push those people to victory. So thank you for that as well. But of course, this is what we're really here to talk about, and that's what in the world happened, and are there logical explanations for it? Was this a mandate for the MAGA agenda? Why didn't Democrats turn out in higher numbers? Why did this confusing thing happen where voters approved of a lot of progressive measures and candidates and then voted for Trump at the same time? What happened to Hispanic voters and women voters and youth voters? They were supposed to show up much more than they did. Did our tactics fail? Did our messaging fail? And, most importantly, I think for me is, did the US just totally shift to the right when we weren't looking, or did something else happen? And there's, of course, like a thousand other possible questions, all very interesting, all worth discussing. We're definitely not going to get to them here today. What I narrowed down the conversation to today was mostly those questions for which we now have some data that can help us answer those questions so that you're not just hearing me speculate. I will speculate, but hopefully on the basis of some pretty firm data. It's still not even 3 weeks after the election. There will be a lot more data becoming available over the next 3 or 6 months. But I think there's enough for us to get a foundation on which to get some comfort or some understanding of what happened so that then we can start taking the next steps of action and moving forward. So what do we know? We know, of course, that Trump will win this election by popular vote by about 2.5 million votes. And just for contrast, Biden won by about 7.1 million votes, the popular vote in 2020. We know that Trump will not get 50% of the vote at this moment, even though not all the votes have been counted. It's pretty clear it's going to be just a hair under 50%, which I hope bothers him. And that he will win by about 1.6 percentage points over Kamala Harris. So, despite what the Trump people are claiming, of course, this was not a landslide, and it's certainly not a mandate. And as far as we can tell, this is one of the smallest margins in the popular vote that any president has won since a really long time ago, like the 19th century. So, yes, he did win, and he has the House and the Senate. I'm not trying to sugarcoat that, but it's a narrow victory. We did see lower voter turnout than in 2020. About 4 million fewer people showed up this year than in 2020. I don't think that's a horrible number because 2020 was an historical high turnout because we were all locked in our houses at the time, if you remember. And everyone had access to mail voting at that time as well. So 4 million fewer voters isn't a huge cause for concern, except that it looks like, and I don't have hard data on this yet, but it looks like most of the people who stayed home were Democrats. They were Biden voters. And not Republicans. And so Republican turnout is going to turn out, it's going to turn out to be substantial and will almost for sure eclipse Democratic turnout. And we should have better information on that soon. We also know, as I mentioned earlier, that people split their votes, that candidates like Kari Lake in Arizona and Mark Robinson in North Carolina lost. But in those same states, Trump won, right? We also know that abortion protections passed in 7 out of the 10 states where they were on the ballot. And that includes states like Arizona, Missouri, Montana, and Nevada. Those are all states that Trump won. So abortion rights and Trump in the same state. There were a few other red states like Alaska, Missouri, Nebraska, and Kentucky that had other progressive measures on their ballots, and they mostly related to sick time and minimum wage, increases in the minimum wage. And those passed in those very red states where Trump also won. And finally, we know that down ballot Democrats in Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada, and Wisconsin, and their pictures are here for you to see, won very, very important Senate or gubernatorial races, again, in states that Trump won. So what's going on there? And this was a little bit illuminating, and that is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went online and asked her supporters, if you voted for Donald Trump and me, or if you voted for Donald Trump and voted Democratic down the ballot, I would really love to hear from you. Okay, so she already knew that some of her supporters voted for both her and Trump. And these are some of the answers she got. I feel you are both outsiders compared to the rest of DC and less establishment. It's real simple. Trump and you care for the working class. I feel like you and Trump are both real. You're focused on the real issues that people care about. You signal change, and Trump signified change. Okay, so somehow it was possible for these people, and probably a lot of people, to hold the very progressive policies and ideals of AOC in their head, and at the same time feel that voting for Trump wasn't a violation of that value, of that set of values. So something to think about, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. Let's talk about gender a little bit and women's support for Republican candidates and how it has changed or not changed over the years. So this purple line is the percent of women who voted for Republican candidates over the years, and about 45% of women in exit interviews, this is, and exit interviews are notoriously not very accurate, but we can at least get trend lines going. About 45% voted for Trump this time. About 42% of them voted for him last time, and in 2016, about 41%. So we had hoped we would see this curve go like all the way down for Trump, and instead it went slightly up. There's still a big gender gap, about a 10-point difference between women and men voting for Trump, but he seems to have gained some women in the process. Same kind of disappointing results for the youth vote. These are people 18 to 29 years old. And when we look at, let's say, young women in 2024 versus young women in 2020, you can see that the Democrat, whoever it was, lost some share of their vote going from 2020 to 2024. And Trump gained that amount of share in his vote. That change was much more significant. I'm sure you're well aware of this by now, in young men who actually only a minority of young men voted for Harris this time around, and about 55% of them voted for Trump. But again, there was this shift. So there's still a gender gap. Many more women of all ages supported the Democratic candidate. But there was a shift towards Trump in pretty much every age group that's been studied so far. And I'll just talk about one other group, and then I'll stop with some of the depressing news. And that is the Latino community. And here we had some very good data. This is not exit polling data. This is actual vote data from the Registrar of Voters. In 3 communities in San Diego County that are primarily Latino, Chula Vista, which is 54%, National City, 62%, and Barrio Logan, 69%. And what you can see is that from 2020, which is the green bar, when, let's say, in Chula Vista, 34% of the people voted for Trump, this time around, 42% voted for Trump. And that rough pattern was repeated in all three of the Latino communities that were shown here. So I think if we expand this to the nation overall, you can certainly draw a conclusion that Latino people definitely shifted towards Trump between 2020 and 2024. So does data like this and a lot of other data I'm sure you're looking at mean that the US shifted significantly to the right in the last 4 years? Or is there some other explanation, or are there multiple explanations for that? And so now I'm going to show you a really complicated looking graph, but hopefully I can help make sense. And maybe some of you have seen this already too. So these are the results of elections around the world, mostly in wealthy countries, between 1950 and 2020. And each dot on this graph is one country's election, showing whether the incumbent party that was up for election either won the election, in which case they're a dot above zero, or if the incumbent party lost the election, in which case they're a dot below zero. And, the further away from zero they get, the better and better the incumbent party did in the dots up here. And of course, in the dots down here, the worse and worse and worse the incumbent party did. And the gist of what you're looking at here is between 1950 and 2022, which is the last date here, every election, the incumbent party lost sometimes in some countries and won sometimes in other countries. And that, there have been ups and downs, but there's never been a year where they all won or they all lost. That is until 2024, which is this bar on the very right-hand side of your screen. And in 2024, every single country that's been followed on this data analysis, and some of those countries are listed at the top: Belgium, France, Japan, et cetera, but there's others as well. Every single country, the incumbent lost, sometimes very badly. And in the case of the US, which is this red dot here, not as badly as others, if that's any comfort. So why 2024? Why did we see all of a sudden, after so many years of collecting this data, what happened between 2020 and 2024 to cause every single incumbent party, whether they were a left-wing party or a right-wing party, to go the other way in the election this year? And of course, what happened between then and now was COVID. And COVID-related inflation, COVID-related mistrust of government, COVID-related distrust and isolation and terror and sadness, all combining to make people so unhappy with their conditions that whoever was in charge got voted out, including our incumbent party. And there was no way for Kamala Harris not to be part of the incumbent party. So again, actually, the data I showed you was from 1950, but it pretty much goes back for 120 years, that this same pattern of some won, some lost was repeated until 2024. Voters punished whoever was incumbent in what's been called by some electoral long COVID. If it's any comfort, the US lost less ground than other countries, and I think it is a tribute to the Harris-Walz campaign and also to all of the work that everybody did, that we came as close as we did. Of course, it's not enough. Um, but I think that even when all the other data and all of the other important forces that molded this election come in, the mood of the public towards anti-incumbency, may still well be the overarching story of this election in the United States and the elections all around the world. And what that means, if that's correct, is that despite running what I think was a superhumanly remarkable campaign, there may have been almost nothing that Kamala Harris could have done to win. And I say that with a lot of sadness, because, as I said, I think she and Tim Walz ran an amazing campaign. And it wasn't just inflation and COVID and everything else they had not going for them, right? They had a campaign of 107 days, among other things, and incredibly low favorability ratings for Biden, totally undeserved, in my opinion, but they had tremendous headwinds against them, and they did amazingly well. And I hope you feel proud of everything you did to support that campaign, to get them as close as they did, to get all those other candidates I talked about over the line and actually winning. But it's a sad, sad moment just to not have that expertise and that joy leading us instead of what we have now. A few other things to mention, and you've all heard about the fractured media environment and what a big role it played in people's ideas about what Trump represented, what Harris represented, what Republicans and what Democrats represented. And the sad thing is that when this is a poll of about 13,000 people taken in the month before the election, people who said they paid a lot of attention to the news were more likely to vote for Democrats. And as they said, they watched less and less and less news, down to like no news at all. The share of those people's vote for Democrats went markedly down, and the share that Trump got went markedly up. And this gray bar here is sort of crazy. That's the independent vote. And what you're seeing is that the independents who didn't watch much news or take in much news, however, also were voted for Trump primarily. And this is a confusing graph, but the important part of it is when those people who said they consumed little or no political news were surveyed about, okay, where do you engage? If you're not picking up a newspaper to get the ball game scores and you happen to see the news, or you're not turning on the news to see what the weather is and you happen to get a headline on NBC or ABC or CBS or CNN. Where are they engaging for whatever kind of information? And it turns out that these low news consumers said they spend most of their time on YouTube and Facebook. Okay. And I don't know how much attention the Democratic campaigns have paid to that kind of information in the past, but it's clear we need to be paying a lot more attention to it in the near future. One of the important things about the fact that people did not get reliable information about, even if it was only by osmosis, is that in poll after poll, when voters are asked about various policies that Kamala Harris proposed. Um, People liked them as long as they didn't think Kamala Harris was responsible for those policies. So, in other words, people like Democratic policies of safeguarding workers' rights, um, and making things better for the working class and the middle class and home ownership. Um, but when it was associated with Kamala Harris, they changed their minds. They liked those policies, though, without knowing who they came from. So disinformation on what the Democrats stand for, on immigration, on crime, the economy, fueled voters' opinions. And somehow or other, Republicans are now seen as the party of the working class. Right-wing messaging occurs in these non-political online spaces, but the messaging happens, right? On comedy channels online, gambling channels, wellness channels, and we relied on the conventional media. And so one of the conclusions you see a lot of people drawing, and maybe they were drawing it before and we didn't pay attention, but the divide in the US is not so much a partisan divide as it is an information divide. So, did the US just shift significantly to the right? That was a question I asked at the beginning of this. I think where I am sitting right now, anti-incumbency rather than a change in everyone's ideology has a lot more to do with what we saw. Yes, some people, if you went to them now, they weren't MAGA before, they're MAGA now. I'm sure there are those people. But I think the large majority of people, especially the Biden voters who voted for Trump this time around, they didn't change their ideologies. They were just unhappy with the current status. So some evidence for that, in addition to that big anti-incumbency chart I showed you, people who split their votes for progressive measures and candidates, but then voted for Trump, people who supported Harris or Democratic policies when they weren't identified that way, that those AOC comments and many others you're seeing, people maintain their progressive values, but they prioritize the practical impact of the lives that we're living right now over ideology. And hard to believe, but I think it's the case that many are either unaware of Trump's agenda or they don't believe he'll actually implement it. The fractured media environment is part of what we're seeing here. And the bottom line is there are decent non-MAGA people who stayed home or they voted for Trump, but they're not awful people. They're not evil people. And our top priority really in the years coming forward is to win them back. So I'm going to talk about some actions we can take to do that, but I thought we could take a few minutes to take a few questions. And one was, why do we think Trump will be any more confident with deportation than he was with building the wall? Yeah, well, fingers crossed. I have read a lot about how complicated and expensive it will be to really do what they're talking about, deporting 10 million people. And some people that I listen to have said this is sort of showcasing that what they really hope is that they're going to scare everybody with all of these horrible edicts coming out, and that a large number of people will self-deport, that none of them are willing to have pictures of detention centers on the news or on Facebook every night. None of them are willing to have businesses lose significant portions of their workforce. So we have to hope, I guess, that they are as incompetent, but we also know that there are many more competent people in the administration this time around. And I think we need to take this seriously with a major grain of salt. How did it work after the 1918 pandemic? What happened then? Um, you know, in 1918, we just came out of a world war. Or no, we were just, yes. And it was different. The administration did not get voted out. And that 1918 epidemic um, has a lot of parallels in some ways, except that so little was written about it. And it was surprising how little was written about it. But it's a very good question. And uh, maybe next time around or in my follow-up email, I will try to answer that one better. Okay. Yeah, I did postcard writing. I know many people did phone banking and door knocking. We tried really hard, and we should all be proud despite the loss. And I totally agree with you. Again, first of all, a lot of what we did worked. It didn't work at the top of the ticket. Um, but certainly there are senators, there are governors, the margins in the Senate and the House are very small right now. We have a very good chance of getting the House back in 2026, especially because voters tend to hold the incumbent party responsible for whatever is going on. Um, so not only are we very proud, um, but I want to say that all of the tactics, all of the things we did, um, were tactics that we had very good, strong data showing that all of them made a significant impact on getting out the vote. Um, of course, those studies were done prior to 2024, and more studies will come out, and we're going to reevaluate all of those tactics again. And it may be that there's a different emphasis within those tactics, or even that some of those tactics have lost some of their punch and we need to think about something else. It's really, of course, impossible to say right now. Other than that, we don't have to keep doing the same things. What we need to do is analyze and look at what worked and what didn't work, and then change if we need to do that. And I want to assure you that that's one thing I am really committed to. It's one thing the swing left people are really committed to, and a lot of the academics who study voter engagement are really committed to. So stay tuned on that one. And there were a million other questions, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to get to all of them. We may have a little more time when we get to the end. Um, but I want to get back to the slides because I know what a lot of people want to talk about is what can they do? And that's where we're going to head next. So going forward, and I do want to say, first of all, there are 142 people here today. And that is just amazing. I mean, with everything that's going on in people's lives, with again, what sort of the numb and the despair that I think we've been dealing with, you all took the step to come here, get engaged, get some information, find out what you can do. And it is that attitude, which is that even when you're sad and not sure and confused, that you want to go forward and do something, that's what's going to change the day. And apathy and sitting at home and watching MSNBC is exactly what MAGA wants us to do, right? And to continue to be isolated and feel like there's nothing we can do. Yeah, we don't have as much power as we would like. But if we pick and choose our battles, there are things that we can do individually and also together. And keeping Trump in check, I mean, it happened already this week, right? Matt Gaetz is no longer, we don't have to look at that face um, for a while till he shows up somewhere else. That was largely due to the fact that there were enough Republican senators that were too scared to vote for him. And that is largely because we all made a fuss about it. And a lot of you made phone calls to those senators to let them know how you felt. As Trump goes on and continues to make unforced errors, of course, we're going to do our best to magnify those failures however we can. We're going to work together to flip the House in 2026 and at the same time elect good local candidates and then protect the vulnerable. And I know this is on everyone's mind, whether it's the environment or whether it's immigrants or whether it's gay people, or whether it's trans people. There's a lot of issues and people that are incredibly vulnerable now. And there are organizations who are geared up and ready to protect them. And I'll give you a way to find out who some of them are. And the last thing is to keep ourselves fortified, right? Us and our networks. Those are the trends, but I'll talk about some specifics. So keeping Trump in check. What can we do? Okay. Making phone calls to senators, congressmen, and down the line, even to local government officials when you get involved in a local issue, is the most effective way to make your voice heard compared to sending an email or signing a petition. And this has been reinforced to us by countless campaign staffers, the candidates themselves. We all need to start picking up the telephone a lot. And the good news is it's really easy. Lots of times you don't even talk to a person, you're leaving a voicemail message, and I'll show you in a second what a typical interaction might be like. But here are some of the items that you can be keeping your elected officials informed on. One is to urge Biden to get background checks on the nominees for Trump's cabinet. This is something that Biden has within his power as long as he's president, and something that he can do until January 20th. Calling your Congress member. The House is the one that's in charge of releasing that ethics committee report on Matt Gaetz. Yeah, he's not a nominee anymore, but I think keeping how awful he was and what a bad pick he was in people's minds is a really good idea. And getting that ethics committee report is out in case he tries to get some other job somewhere else. Calling your senators and urging them to block the nominations of at least Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, and RFK Jr. And for those of you who have a question on whether it's worthwhile calling reliably blue senators or Congress people, yes, it's worth it. Some of them don't have very good spines and they need help. Some of them just need the inspiration and the oomph. So it is not a wasted call, even if it's a reliably blue representative. And if you have a Republican, if you live in a place where your representative is a Republican and you know they are reliable Republicans, just remember they have an incredibly narrow margin in both houses of Congress. They're coming up for election, and people are going to hold them responsible for crappy things that happen. So they are vulnerable to pressure from you. Finally, another call you can make is to Democratic senators to confirm there are 29 pro-democracy judges that Biden has nominated. They can all get approved and confirmed. Trump's already lobbying to get the Republicans to fight against this, but there's a good chance we can get some of them through. So this is just a typical way it would work, calling a senator, a congressperson, or anyone. And that is to go onto one of the links that we're going to provide you with. You put in your address, and they give you the names of all your elected representatives and the phone numbers that you can reach them. As I said, it might be a recording, in which case you just leave a voicemail message, or a staffer may answer the call. And all you have to do is give your name and the zip code you're from, and then say, I'm calling to make a quick comment. And in this particular case, please confirm the 29 pending judicial nominations during the final session of Congress. Truthfully, that's all you have to say. You don't have to give your reasons. You don't have to give a long explanation, right? They're just going to mark yes, no on their tally sheets, okay? If you feel like giving more information, of course, that's fine. But really, you just have to make a declarative statement about what the issue is, and what you want that representative to do. And then it's over, okay? So it's easy, and we're going to need to be doing a lot of this. So no time like the present. These are all relatively immediate issues, the ones that I have listed here. Again, all of this information will appear in the email that I sent you, so you don't have to write it down. Another immediate action is ballot curing, and I know some of you have done this. It is some of the most rewarding phone calls I have made, because what we're doing when we ballot cure is calling voters who made small mistakes on their mailed ballots. And if they can correct those mistakes within a certain time period, their vote gets counted. So people are very happy to hear from you, unlike sometimes when we're making calls for candidates. They're very willing to talk. And there are two races in California that are still undecided. Derek Tran in Orange County is, as of this morning, 510 votes ahead, but it's still undecided. And you can make those ballot curing calls now through November 30th. And then Adam Gray, who's all the way up, I think, near Redding in California, Congressional District 13, he's behind by about 200 votes. And right now, that ballot curing is good through November 26th. Daily sessions, you get trained. There's a script. You can put 1 hour into it. You could put the whole day into it. That's completely up to you. But it is not a difficult, you're not selling anyone, you're not persuading anyone, you're actually helping someone. So it's highly recommended. Those actions and many more are on our website, takeactionsandiego.org/actions, and we'll put that in the chat. And among other things, is our next meeting. We're going to skip December, but we will be meeting again January 18th. We tend to meet monthly on a Saturday towards the end of the month, and usually by Zoom, but periodically we have in-person meetings as well. So check out that website. It's updated at least weekly. Between now and January 20th, there's some more you can do. And the first is to think in terms of your local network. Maybe you've done this already, but who are all of your elected representatives, all the way from city council person up to your congressperson? Who are the groups in your area, the immigrant rights, the civil rights, the voter protection groups in your area that maybe you would volunteer for or give some money to or get involved with? Who are the active political groups in your area? And maybe even who's the one friend or three friends or five friends you know that maybe wouldn't come to a meeting like this one. But if you called them and said, there's something we need to do tomorrow, we all need to call our congressperson, they would probably listen to you and they would probably do it. Like they're your little pods. And I think we need to be thinking about that first in terms of activating people, but also in terms of just staying connected. We need to do more to stay connected with one another. There's training also that we can be doing in preparation. Oh, before I get to the training, though, I'll mention that also on our website, we have a resource page that will list the names of many of the groups that I've listed here, the immigrant rights and so forth groups, websites where you can get the phone numbers and contact information for your elected representatives, and much, much more. So find that resource guide. We'll be updating it a lot, and if you all have suggestions for it, we will add to that as we go on. I see a few raised hands, and if you could put your question into the Q&A, that'll be easier for us to track it. Thank you. There's training also that's going to go on. The one that is coming up, Common Cause, which is a great organization, does a training every Thursday on talking to your friends and family when they might have different views than you. Highly recommended now that Thanksgiving is coming up. Social media training. We need to be out there more. Who knows in exactly what way and how to do it? It's a big discussion going on, but when there is training that meets the needs that we've been talking about, I will let you know about it, and I would encourage everybody to think about it, even if you're squeamish about social media. Between now and January 20th, also, we're going to continue this conversation. Maybe it'll be some written things, maybe it'll be another meeting. We'll be talking more about tactics and messaging, and as more voter file analysis comes through. But I think also just kind of on the emotional level, I'm feeling angry, and the anger, keeping it inside is just a horrible feeling. And so as much as I can, I try to put it to work instead, and work doing the kinds of things that we're talking about and things you're probably already doing. A strategic donation plan. This is a good time to think about one because you are going to start getting the emails really soon. And believe it or not, people are starting to campaign for 2026 already. So there's going to be campaign emails and institutions and groups and everything. So think now, if you have any money left after this election, how you want to distribute that money, and what kinds of groups you want to be distributing it to. I will mention that our meetings generally have informational speakers at them, and this whole year, what we're going to be doing is inviting speakers from some of maybe the undersung groups that really do the work of engaging voters, some of the grassroots organizing groups in Arizona, in Georgia, in Wisconsin, wherever they are, who are there year-round talking to voters and gaining their trust. And these are the groups I think we need to seriously invest in, not just with money, but with our attention and maybe our volunteer time as time goes on. Finally, keep yourself healthy, fortify yourself and your networks with as much hope and resiliency. And in my case, music, that you can, to keep yourself inspired and keep on going in what is going to be, there's just no doubt about it, this is really going to be a difficult 4 years. I think we need to support one another and not do what the left sometimes does, which is get into fights with each other over whose fault things were. Let's unify around getting those voters back into the fold and illustrating the awfulness of MAGA, and stop infighting amongst ourselves. And onward from January 20th, we will stay connected. I will stay connected with you until you unsubscribe. And if you do, that's fine. But hopefully we provide information and inspiration and actions for you, and you'll want to keep looking. Um, but I want you to remember about this long heritage that we have in this country of protest and solidarity and standing up for what is right. And that sometimes these were very long struggles and people didn't win all of the time. Um, but they kept doing it anyway. And that's how I think we need to be. It sort of feels to me like the best way to get through these years as long as we do this together. So uh, I'll end and then maybe technically we were going to end at 5, but if people want to stay around for a few more questions, we can do this. But I want to end with I think this very appropriate quote. It comes from quite a long time ago from a historian named Howard Zinn. And it says, to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. So maybe we can keep that in our heads and do our best. And I think that's what you all are trying to do. So thank you again for being here. Keep your eye out for an email from me with everything that we did here. And let me stop sharing my screen and see if we can answer a few more questions.